A child is born. Destiny is written. And the past becomes a prologue for the future. Sir Catchick Paul Chater rose from a poor boy to be the financial king of a colony, its greatest landowner, one of its most generous benefactors, a leader in the administration, and probably one of the best-known men in all of East, with a reputation that made him famous. Memory must be flowing in the blood of these present-day Calcutta Armenians. Their ancestors had come here long ago and settled down in this city. What brought them here? From their homeland where the Tigris and Euphrates flow. Since time immemorial, the settlers of the Araxes Valley have played an important role in international and Asian trade. Armenia is situated in the major trade routes to India, due to which the Armenian merchants were familiar with trade roads leading to India.
Probably around the late 1650s or early 1660s that the Armenians arrived in Madras. And I would say that is the earliest presence of Armenians as a business community in India. There were earlier Armenians who had come to the Mughal court and things like that, but they were mainly visitors as such.
Most of the spices from the Spice Islands, that means the modern Java, Sumatra, Borneo, that came to India. And India also produced some spices, especially the Malabar coast. And all these spices, they went overland through Central Asia, Middle East to Europe. The ultimate port was Alexandria. From Alexandria, they were transported, to Venice, where all the European merchants came.
Historical evidence says that the Armenians were settled in and around Calcutta even before the city founder Job Chanak came here. And so, our story about one Calcutta-born Armenian who walked dreams all his life and realized them on distant shores becomes a story worth telling. The Chater family root can be traced predominantly to Persia, where years earlier the Persian king Shah Abbas I organized a forced migration of 300,000 Armenians from Armenia to the internal region of Persia. It was from such backgrounds that Catchick Paul Chater made his descent. Paul Chater was born to Armenian parents in Calcutta on the 8th of September 1846. His father, Chater Paul Chater, was employed by the government of Bengal in the Secretary's office based at No. 1 Council House Street as an assistant to the registrar. His mother was a housewife and a devoted mother. He was baptized in the Armenian Holy Church of Nazareth in Calcutta. Aga Catchick Arakale, his great-great-grandfather from his mother's side, from whom he had borrowed his name, was a true aristocrat. And among his many contributions were this wall that surrounds the compound of the Armenian Holy Church of Nazareth in Calcutta, the splendid vicarage, and a clock that keeps time even today. Chater was orphaned when he was 9. His father, a courageous man, drowned in the Hooghly while trying to save the life of another person at the Calcutta Ghats on 31st January 1853. And 2 years later, he lost his mother. Courage and a deep sense of humanity would remain with Chater for life. A year after his mother's death, young Chater, through the influence of a family physician, was admitted as a foundationer to La Martiniere School, Calcutta in 1856. He quickly acquired a reputation for academic brilliance and a capacity for hard work, and skills in sports, especially cricket. Paul Chater was all of 18 years old and fresh out of school when the call came from Hong Kong, then being transformed into the brightest jewel of the British Empire. It was as if a door had opened in the young man's life. He had a sister, Anna, and a husband, Dr. Jordan, already settled in Hong Kong. His brothers and sisters all encouraged him to go. He probably did not know it then, but he was stepping onto a path from which he would never look back. As he took his first steps in the new world, his business inspiration must have been from the legendary Armenian merchant prince of India, Khoja Bhanu's Qalandar, who in 1688 entered into an important commercial understanding with the East India Company on behalf of the Armenians trading in India, and opened the floodgates for British commerce. Indeed, Hong Kong was a prospering town in those days, the second largest port in the world, trading houses and foreign companies doing phenomenal business. For young Chater, it was indeed the chosen land.
Paul Chater came here at the age of 18 in 1864, and in those days it was a pretty unruly place. Of course, the British had occupied Hong Kong down there at Possession Point on January the 26th, 1841. And it was unruly, and they used to say that in those days the nearest lawyer was in fact in Calcutta. There were no lawyers here at all. There were no such people as chartered accountants. The first chartered accountant didn't come here until 1901.
On the 1st of April 1864, he was appointed as an assistant in the Bank of Hindustan, Japan and China on a salary of $50 a month. By end 1864, he received a raise to $100. Fortune had already turned her benevolent eye on Chater. He struck up a friendship with the Sassoons, one of the pioneer founders of Hong Kong-Shanghai Banking Corporation. And it was to launch him on his career as an exchange and bullion broker. 2 years later, in 1866, Chater left the Bank of Hindustan and started as an exchange and bullion broker with his savings. In fact, in the very first month of trading, he earned $600. The ebb and tide of the dollar had fascinated Chater during his days at the bank. And now he was ready to start a unique partnership with a dynamic personality, close friend, colleague and fellow Indian, Hormushe Nauroji Modi. Modi had reached Hong Kong from Bombay in 1860, 4 years before Chater.
Well, they became very good friends, but they first met at the Bank of Hindustan, where they both were working together in the same similar positions as clerk. But they struck up a friendship straight away. They obviously had a lot in common. They both came from they both came from India. They were clearly contemporaries. They had the similar thoughts, and they decided to set up a business called Chater and Modi, and it encompassed pretty well almost everything really. Land purchasing, businesses generally, and as they progressed through their lives, everything seemed to mirror each other.
Their partnership became one of the best and most rewarding of relationships. In 1868, Paul Chater and Modi formed a company between them. Chater and Modi first became brokers on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange and Hong Kong Gold Bullion Market, and they were instrumental in laying the foundation for the stock exchange to become the second largest in Asia, and the gold bullion market to become the largest, ranked fourth in the world. Both Paul Chater and Modi shared an interest in racing horses. Paul Chater attended his first race meet in 1865. In fact, it was he who introduced Modi to it. Both owned a stable in 1872. Paul Chater raced as Mr. Paul, while Modi raced as Mr. Buxy, a name borrowed from his maternal uncle. This is Paul Chater with White Velvet in 1878. He won 8 races with White Velvet, 3 years in succession. Between 1880 and 1910, he was elected chairman of the Board of Stewards of the Hong Kong Jockey Club. Today, the Champion Stakes is known as the Chater Cup. Chater and Modi were men who thought beyond borders. Beside the stock exchange and horse racing, they realized the potential of Kowloon, the largely underdeveloped area that lay across the harbor from Hong Kong Island. They chose real estate development as their next business venture, and they hit the jackpot. Kowloon Wharf and Godown Company were the first Chater companies in this venture. Substantial real estate holdings in several high-growth areas followed. And the range had a lot of variety. From banks to dairy farms and cold storages, ferry services to tramway transportation, hotels to electrical utilities. It was Chater who pioneered the 57-acre prior reclamation scheme in Central District, which would become one of the most valuable built-up land areas in the world today. In 1888, encouraged by the successful completion of his Kowloon project, Paul Chater made a trip to London to lobby for the permission for his waterfront and prior reclamation scheme. He formed a partnership with James Johnstone Keswick to launch the Hong Kong Land Investment and Agency Company, better known today as Hong Kong Land. The reclamation started in 1890 and was completed in 1904. And he was awarded his own road, Chater Road. Hong Kong Land began buying sites and erected office buildings. Between June 1904 and December 1905, it had erected Hong Kong's first skyscraper. Land frontage extension, naval dockyard extension, commercial piers, gardens, roads, cable tramways to the peak. Chater built them all, and he built them well.
He created wealth through energy, ingenuity, and astonishing versatility. And in equal measure, he poured sensitivity, humanism, and philanthropy into society.
With the new development, the need for energy was foreseen by Chater. One of the three men who pioneered the Hong Kong electric venture, his name was foremost. Paul Chater was the director of Hong Kong Electric Company for 37 years. Chater's status and influence in Hong Kong business communities and society is evident from the fact that a public garden and one of the busiest thoroughfares in Hong Kong are named after him.
He's remembered because of this particular Chater garden. That is one thing. It's named after him, which I thought was rather nice. He'd been dead for 50 years and they named it after him. Then again you've got, as I mentioned, Chater House, which was named recently.
Chater's astonishing energy and versatility is seen in another Chater-Modi venture in 1892, mining coal in French Indochina, present-day Vietnam, which went on to become one of the truly successful commercial undertakings in the history of French Indochina. In 1892, the grateful French government made Catchick Paul Chater a member of that much coveted order, Légion d'honneur. The young Armenian from Calcutta had by this time become quite a legend in Hong Kong. He led in every area. He was enormously wealthy, and his generosity towards every good cause matched the largeness of his spirit. For 20 years, he served as unofficial member of the Legislative Council of Hong Kong Administration and was the first unofficial member to be appointed to the Executive Council in 1896. With his position in the administration of Hong Kong, it allowed him to fulfill his desire and vision to develop Hong Kong and give its citizens a better opportunity in all spheres of life. His amazing alchemy brought development into life. He championed any humanitarian or noble cause that came his way. Yet he staunchly maintained the integrity of a gentleman. He was indeed one of the keepers of destiny. His devotion as a Freemason made him past master of Victoria Lodge and district Grand Master of the District Grand Lodge of Hong Kong and South China from 1881 to 1909. And he was the only resident Far Eastern Mason to ever be honored with the 33rd degree in the English Constitution. So meaningful were his contributions that on retirement, the craft established the Chater Masonic Scholarship Fund Trust in memory of his leadership. In 1897, for his extraordinary and important services rendered to the colony, Paul Chater was conferred the champion of the most distinguished order of St. Michael and St. George. He represented the colony of Hong Kong at the Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee and attended many a royal function at Buckingham Palace and St. James's Palace. He was also an honoured delegate at the historic coronation of His Majesty King Edward VII.
In 1902, Catchick Paul Chater was knighted.
The highest award bestowed by the British Empire. For Sir Chater, it wasn't enough to have a good idea, devote a lot of energy, and to make a lot of money. He wanted to contribute even more, and that left him little time to devote to romance. But then he did find a young Maria Christine Pearson, fell in love, and married her on the 17th of August 1910 in the parish of St. George, Hanover Square, London. Lady Chater, as she came to be known, rounded off Paul Chater's otherwise complete life.
Was Sir Paul Chater simply a very powerful and a very wealthy businessman who had made it very big from humble beginnings?
He was actually much more than that. Centuries of rich Armenian culture was in his blood, expressed already in the fabulous architectural edifices he had created in Hong Kong and Kowloon. His palatial residence at Conduit Road was visionary architecture designed by his trusted friend and ally of 40 years, James Orange. It was the most opulent of homes in pre-World War II Hong Kong.
He lived there very happily and entertained immensely there. I know on one occasion he entertained the King of Hawaii. He had a very nice lunch set up there and then took him on a private tour of the Chater collection that was housed at Marble Hall. And so it was fitting really that in Sir Paul's will he left Marble Hall to the people of Hong Kong.
Marble Hall was built towards the end of the 19th century. About 500 feet above sea level, it was set to command an excellent view of the harbour. Its external walls were of stuccoed brickwork, finished in classical style. The beautiful marble used in its construction was specially quarried in Greece and Italy and polished in Belgium before being shipped to Hong Kong. Sir Paul Chater developed a keen interest in historical aspects of Chinese relations with Western powers. But exemplified in even more refined ways was his passion for collecting works of art, paintings, lithographs, and prints. The collection gave a unique record of Sino-British relations during the 18th and 19th centuries. The Chater collection by James Orange, a tribute to their friendship, is the only window to that splendid collection of history.
He left the whole house and the Chater collection to the government, and they in turn took the collection particularly, and because of course it was so big and so vast and so diverse, they didn't have an establishment big enough to house it. So they split it up and placed it in various government offices and university buildings and prominent places. And the house itself was eventually handed over to the Admiralty, and it was the headquarters for the Admiralty for some time. And then, of course, the Japanese invaded Hong Kong. and the Japanese then took over Marble Hall, and it became the base for senior officers of the Japanese army. In the May 1946, the most tragic thing happened. Marble Hall caught fire. I think from 1946 right through to 1952, it stood as a wreck. So unfortunately, in 52, the house was demolished, what was left of it, and a block of flats called Chater Hall Flats was built there, and they were a government set of flats. So sadly, a terrible end to a beautiful house.
Sir Paul Chater's life, though virtually unknown to most of us today, was one of fame, fortune, vigor and charm. But generosity and benevolence
seemed to overwhelm all these assets. If his great-grandfather made a significant contribution to the Armenian Church in Calcutta, Sir Paul Chater went much further with St. Andrew's Church, where he attended divine service every Sunday in Hong Kong. This church was erected entirely at his expense in 1905, and just 4 years later, the old vicarage was built, a further gift from the great man. Around 1924-25, Sir Chater's old school La Martiniere in Calcutta was in the grip of a financial crisis that threatened to close it down forever. Word probably reached the man in his seat of power in faraway Hong Kong. Because suddenly, like a gift of God, the school received 11 lakh rupees from him, and the school survived.
Today, when we look back, and we have a day in our calendar, school calendar, which is called the Paul Chater Day. We have special prayers on that day when we remember this benefactor.
Thank you for Lord Martin, our founder, for Paul Chater, our benefactor, and for the lives and examples of all who have served.
Sir Catchick Paul Chater too expressed a desire to visit the city of his birth and his old school. But that was not to be. Sir Paul Chater was laid to eternal rest on the 27th of May 1926 in the city that he had helped build. His conviction that helping society is most important made him a legend in a lifetime. Sir Chater's life is an astonishing journey in search of global character. The sum of many separate regional and cultural identities. To know him is to know the world in microcosm. He was a man who knew ideas, transcending time and space. He is an Armenian hero whose roots are in Calcutta. If this thought shines through this biography, it is because of the awesome life of the most honorable Sir Catchick Paul Chater.